I'm the MC for the day, Andrew Bowerbank. Most of you know me. If you don't, I'm the Vice President at WSP Canada for Sustainability, and just new to the role actually. And it's good to have some of my colleagues at WSP with me. Hands up if you're a WSPer. We've got Patrick, we've got Anthony, and we've got Tiffany, and I've also got Lindsay outside helping out with Natasha. So thanks for everybody coming out for helping out. I want to get into a bit of the background of why we're here today from a big global context. Not so much the subject matter, but something that's really driving us in what we're doing. I think it's important to recognize some of the issues, and we've got people here that have seen me do similar kind of talks before. I'm going to call out Larry Bryden in particular. I think Larry's been to every single one of the events that I've hosted like this. So Larry, thanks for coming out again. I don't know if you like it or you're just trying to do something you're very good at, which you are. But the imperative of what we're doing, I think the things are starting to really line up in a way that's uncomfortable. I'll say that. We are trying so hard to make a difference in the marketplace, and we talk about market transformation a lot, right? We look at systems like LEED as a rating system, probably the most prolific system in Canada and North America for green buildings. And I've been involved with programs since it first crossed borders way back 15 years ago. But still, only 18% of buildings are classified as green buildings. Right? We look at the fact that transportation, still majority fossil fuel-driven transportation systems. Energy, only 22% uses something other than fossil fuels. So we're nowhere near that transformation goal that we're all striving for. Many years ago, when I was head of the World Green Building Council, I was also a member rep of the United Nations. And these numbers have been growing ever since I left there back in 2011. And now we're on track to have 50 megacities on this planet by 2050, with populations of over 10 million per person, with 70% of us living in these urban centers. We look at the fact that right now we have almost 1 billion people at risk of starvation. We have 1 billion people without access to fresh water. And we have over 1 billion people without access to energy. We don't understand that where we live now. We don't fathom what that means not to have food, water, energy to rely on a daily basis. Wake up in the morning, turn on a light, brush our teeth, leave the tap running, go downstairs, have a coffee, have a bagel. It's easy. But we look at what is being said around the world right now. The UN says that we're going to need $7 billion a year by 2050, or 2030 for agricultural adaptation. Water infrastructure, according to the Boston Consulting Group, $2.3 trillion a year. Energy infrastructure, $40 billion a year, according to the World Bank. Where's this money coming from? How are we going to do that if we're trying to build these megacities? And we all know this, we've seen the latest UN report, we need to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050. Top that off, we're now at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. That means we're going faster. That means biological, physical, and digital systems are pushing technology faster and faster. So cities are getting bigger, populations are growing, resources are getting sucked up. China's having a hard time even finding sand to use in cement and concrete for building. So we've got a bit of an issue, and I think we're this pigeon. We're getting this wake-up call. Us in this room, we get all this. I'm not here to sell it. I'm here because we're setting context for our conversation today. And all the slides I just showed you, everybody agrees with one of them, but seeing them all together, the mathematics aren't working. We've got to figure out what we're going to do. My concern really is down to kind of three things: resource management, energy demand, byproducts, and emissions. That's the three things for me. We can figure out how to manage that, fine. The barriers for us, though, this is industry barriers. Especially in Canada, we're having a hard time really recognizing true market leaders out there. And I think it's a responsibility of big companies, big industry, to use that voice, use the resources that we have, whether it's marketing or any kind of collateral, to try and push the leadership in the marketplace. Embracing innovation and change. In Canada, we're recognized for our innovation, but only early stage innovation. And change is not something that people necessarily accept very easily. In Canada, we suck at celebrating successes. We all know that. We do not have the American bravado. We say sorry too much and thank you. We need to celebrate successes, and not just success of when something's happening, but when a project is finished. That's when we should get loudest. But we tend to get quiet when something's finished and move on to the next thing. Right? And finally, return on investment. I'm always harping on that. Return on investment. Why are people in it? We're not doing to hug trees and save a planet. We've got to know the economic recourse of what we're doing about this stuff. Right? So we look at some of the opportunities that's out there right now. What I like is, and I think most of you will agree with me, is the term sustainability. Even defining it's hard, but I think even the term itself has been evolving over the past 10 years. It's not what people think it is anymore. And I think now the triple bottom line, that whole idea of people, planet, profit, it used to be an academic exercise, but now it's becoming part of common practice within business. And that's all of a sudden making a lot of sense, and that's helping out a lot. We look at the opportunities now, what's going on, it's that idea of responsible leadership. And this is why we're here today. It's getting ready for the marketplace so we can be the watchdogs as things start moving faster and faster and faster towards that fourth industrial revolution. Okay? So we have to get in front of market trends. So what I have been doing probably for the past 10 years is doing these type of workshops on various topics. And again, Larry, you probably recognize every single one of these. Back in 2011, I think there's Larry Bryden sitting right there. Look at that. So what we do is we get together in a room, we talk out the subject, we capture all the information, and we publish a market report, and then we start to build projects and get things done. What we did back in 2011, we did the EC3 initiative, Energy, Climate, Communication, Collaboration, talked about what is the economic opportunity around green. And back then, that was not a conversation. Then we went on to electric vehicle infrastructure for Ontario. We ended up developing the electric vehicle program for PowerStream, got into their very first Nissan Leaf in the country. We did a white paper and started working with the province on infrastructure development. We started working with a group called DCL and developing new ultra-green healthcare facilities. And we did a design charrette and planned around that for a company that had no idea what that meant. Then with Ellis Dawn, we got into the Carbon Impact Initiative. And that's where things started getting really exciting because the workshop was in this room about 3 years ago-ish, right? I would say about 3 years ago. What was exciting at that time, including WSP, we had some of the largest companies in the country agreeing to work together post-workshop and create the Carbon Impact Initiative and look at projects that will really start making that difference. And our action plan was published. It became very popular, which is great, but it looked at 4 key drivers of our action plan. It was pilot projects and net zero energy and carbon neutral. It was looking at how do we track carbon during construction and operations of a building, because no one was doing that. And it was testing and verifying technologies so we could help clients look at new technologies to embed in projects that we might be apprehensive about something they don't know. And again, as I said already, that return on investment is a 4th element. But we've had some great successes. We've already got, and Kevin's here working with us on this project, this is the first net zero energy institutional building in Ontario. We flipped the switch on the solar panels a few months ago. So that was a great success. We published a market report around that one. Worked on the Brickworks, Evergreen Brickworks building, Kiln Barns Center for a new innovation event space, carbon neutral. And Natasha worked tirelessly on this one, just trying to figure out how do you track all the emissions of trucks coming and going, and propane, and materials, and scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. It was crazy. And you look at these kind of projects and you realize someone's saying, hey, I want a net zero energy building. It's not easy to do these kind of projects. It needs this kind of leadership collaborating to make them work. Right? And we got into that whole idea of life cycle assessment. And we start tracking emissions during the processes and creating a tool that can do that. Natasha was great at getting $2 million from the federal government to create a carbon accounting tool with the University of Toronto. And that tool is now under development at Ellis Dawn. But we're here today to talk about the subject matter that seems to not want to cross people's mouths, and that's food. What you'll notice about the events that we've done until now is they're very cross-collaborative. If we look at the electrical vehicle market, at the time, a car manufacturer and a home builder and a utility have never had to talk before. But then all of a sudden, you're plugging a car into a building and getting energy off the grid. Now we're looking at an issue where the UN says the majority of GHG emissions comes from the agricultural sector. This is all the processes involved in. This is not cows burping. This is everything in the processes involved to get food to our table. That's a huge number that we're not talking about. So we're working in the building sector and the energy sector, but who's tackling that number? And hopefully we're going to get the first step moving towards that today. But these numbers are a little scary. I just pulled this one up yesterday. I noticed Texas is really small, so I pulled up some of the big ones there. But you look at some of the problems with food security and climate change around the world. And the UN is stating that we need agricultural land the size of Brazil by 2050 to feed populations hitting 9 billion people. And that amount of agricultural land does not exist on this planet. So what are we going to do about it? Right? Dixon de Pommier, and where's Henry? Henry, you are a disciple of this gentleman, am I correct on that?
Yeah, he's my mentor.
Yeah, and so when I first started doing keynotes, and Larry remembers this probably 10 years ago, I started talking about vertical farming because I love the idea of that cross-sector collaborative idea of building, science, energy, plant growing, all coming together. And I started researching Dixon and some of his ideas around vertical pods, and then you sell the produce within the urban core. But there's stuff going on around the world of design competitions. Las Vegas, we've got Singapore, London, this Perkins and Will project proposed for London, England. I don't know if I'm going to put cows on a building, but the concept is at least interesting from South Korea. This one here is what really fascinated me and really started pushing us in what we're doing. This is out of Sweden. This is the World Food Building. It's under construction right now. And what I love about this is all not just about growing food. This is harvesting using AI and robotics. This is using different technologies. This is intelligent building systems. This is growing plants on the south side facade. On the north side is tenant lease out office space. Now, plants give off clean oxygen. People give off CO2. It's an integrated, healthy indoor environment. That's the sales pitch. That's the ROI. And this is now under construction. So this kind of project gives us a lot of opportunity. Now, I've shown you just a few quick examples. I don't want to take Henry's team away because he's going to get into really great stuff. But you look at something like this, Machu Picchu in Peru, look at this little area. Doesn't it look a lot like that vertical farming? So it's old ideas, new technology, new ways of doing things. Okay? I'm going to call Henry on that. And I want to do a bit of a bio on him because Natasha and I met Henry about, 6 months ago now, maybe? Yeah, that's about right. And so really, really impressive guy. Things that he's doing, I'll let him obviously explain more, but he's a sustainability strategist focused on urban agriculture, water issues, and emerging technologies. He holds a degree in political science from UBC and a master's of science and sustainable management from Columbia University. He's the founder of the popular blog Agritecture.com and a co-founder of the Association of Vertical Farming. 4 years ago, Henry launched his company Agritecture Consulting, a boutique global urban agriculture advising firm where he helps entrepreneurs with vertical farming, greenhouse and local food systems feasibility studies, farm design and implementation, and he's consulted on more than 60 urban agriculture projects in 10 countries. So please welcome Henry Gordon.
I'm going to try the hands-free thing. Well, thank you so much to Andrew and Natasha. I am so honored to be here as a fellow Canadian. It's great to come back to Toronto and be able to share the ideas that I've been exploring.
Tell me where you came from recently.
Oh, I just got back from Saudi Arabia. We have a client there. We're building an urban agriculture accelerator focused on vertical farming. So I know it's controversial right now, but it's a place that really needs this. And I'm going to talk about some of the drivers for urban agriculture as well and why it makes sense there. So let me just get into it a bit. First of all, this talk is really supposed to inform you. My goal today is to help you understand the realities, opportunities, and challenges of vertical farming. And I'll make these slides available so you don't take pictures of everything. But I just want to talk a little bit again about my story. I think, Natasha reminded me that I should wear a suit for this high-end event. She said, I know how urban farmers dress sometimes, but, farming isn't what it used to be, and I think urban farming really captures the next generation, especially us millennials, and our hopes and dreams to not only make money, but make an impact at the same time. And I think our business, Agritecture Consulting, really embodies that. As was mentioned, we started as a blog, so I was at UBC. I started understanding food security and urban ag. I did study at Ryerson as well, that same topic, and I couldn't find an accurate source that gave me the widespread understanding of urban ag I wanted. And so I created a space that presented both the juxtaposition of the utopia vision of cities and vertical farming that Dixon presents, and then also presented real business, real events, real news, so my audience could really feel like they can get engaged actively. And we are tech agnostic in agriculture consulting, so we do everything from soil all the way up to vertical farming. And we believe that the most successful projects really consider the context and what kinds of farming can apply to that context for the highest ROI. So just a little bit more about my story. I grew up in Hong Kong and actually lived there for about 6 years. So I've lived in about 3 of the largest 20 cities in the world. And through this experience, I was able to observe a lot of things. How do people deal with density? How can we get creative with parks on the sides of buildings and walkways that go through spaces? Our apartment was on the 40th floor. Then we moved to Tokyo, even denser city, and I started exploring how technology plays a role in cities and how consumers can be connected to the city in an active way. Tokyo leads this in a lot of activities. But I really observed a lot that why are these cities just consuming? You know, we have buildings that just consume energy and they produce waste. And what we're trying to get to, this is Moscow, and where I was 16, another big city. And you know, why do buildings only consume? Why do we think that buildings are okay to just consume energy and produce waste? They produce economic output. But why can't we start to think about the city and buildings as productive uses? They serve a use in our city. They're a consistent typology. And so a lot of my thinking with vertical farming is about how we can take what we're learning from urban ag and apply it to buildings in general and start to shift them from being consumers into productive. And that's what I'd like us to think about a bit more today. So first, let's talk about the flaws in the current system. We have enormous amounts of pesticide use. That's not only a health concern, but actually the pesticides go into our waterways and create ocean acidification, which is a major global issue. We use about 70% of our limited fresh water for agriculture. That's not sustainable based on some of the projections that Andrew already mentioned. Food miles. Food miles have an effect not only on the carbon footprint, but also the quality of our food. We know that when we get kale in New York City that's grown in California, there's nutritional loss in that transportation across the country. So we need to understand that it's not just about yields, but it's also about the quality and nutritional density of everything we produce, especially when we're spending that much energy to produce something. Food waste is a major issue. We're looking at about 30% just in the production stage. But once it gets to the consumer, sometimes even another 40% is lost. So all across the chain, from producing to distribution to consumption, we have major losses. Globally, we actually produce enough food to feed everybody. We just don't distribute it properly and we waste it, which I think is a huge disappointment. So urban agriculture plays a role in that because we're bringing the farm closer to the consumer. And so there are ways to reduce waste as you understand the relationship between the farmer and the consumer in new ways. And then this is the average age of the U.S. farmer in Canada. In the U.S. it's about 58, in Australia it's about 60, in Europe it's getting to the 60s as well. This number has been increasing for the past 30 years. So we talk a lot about food security, but I think we also need to think about knowledge security. Who's going to grow our food? Who has the understanding on how to set up viable businesses for agriculture? If we're not training our next generation, then we don't really have much of a chance to do that. And I think this is our opportunity with vertical farming and emerging technologies to inspire a new generation of farmers to start to get that number down there. So some major challenges. And as we know, the UN IPCC has given us a dire warning with about 12 years to get our act together to avoid massive destruction. So let's talk about urban agriculture. As I said, not all kinds are the same. And so I want to just kind of help inform you and frame your thinking as you see farms or as you're considering integrating farms into your projects. So on the low-tech side, these are all New York-based projects. You have kind of the typical community garden. It's hard to see here, but this is a community garden in the lower part of Manhattan in Battery Park. And it serves an important purpose. It's a gathering place. It serves as green infrastructure, slowing down rainwater in a Zone 1 flood zone. But it doesn't produce year-round, for example, because we have winter in New York City. Brooklyn Grange is probably the most successful commercial soil-based urban farm. It's about an acre, the first facility, on a rooftop. They got green infrastructure grants, and it runs as a private business. With that said, they make about 50% of their money off of events like weddings. So it's not only the production of food that's a driver for their revenue, which is fine, but it's just a consideration when you're working with soil. Harlem Grown is a hybrid model because they have a soil-based farm that's more focused on variety. So typically when you're working with soil, you get a wider variety of crops, which is a benefit. But again, you don't have a lot of that enclosed, controlled environment agriculture to grow year-round like you would with hydroponics. So they have a soil-based plot and then they have a hydroponic plot. And they kind that's really interesting for a community group. And their model is about selling 1/3 to high-end restaurants in Harlem, 1/3 they give away for free, and 1/3 they sell at cost. And so that's their nonprofit model. Sky Vegetables is a commercial version of a hydroponic farm. It's the only commercial farm on a residential structure. So at least greenhouse in a residential structure. It's on a LEED Platinum affordable housing building in the Bronx. It's about 10,000 square feet and produces mostly leafy greens and herbs for residents there. On the high-tech side, I'm sure you've all heard about aerofarms, but there's a number of vertical farms that are also in that category. This area is about ultimate control. How can you control every variable in the farm, from climate to water temperature to pH, every single aspect, so we can maintain consistency no matter what the weather is outside. So huge opportunities on that side for producing yield. What I want you to think about is what are the trade-offs along the spectrum, right? On the aerofarm side, you don't really get that community feeling, right? Nobody can walk into aerofarms and pick a head of lettuce. Nobody can really go there and take a class. It's a closed environment. It should be that way to avoid pests and outbreaks. So that's fine, but that is a specific trade-off between soil-based or open greenhouse activities and vertical farming. And so when you're thinking about your projects, you need to think, what is the right fit for our goals? What is our top priority? Is it yield? Is it education? Is it community building? And based on that top goal, you should then choose your method for production and your scale as well. And there's also huge differences on costs. So these are capital costs just for equipment. So on the low-tech side for planters, even the nicest ones, you're looking at $30 a square foot. But all the way up to the high-tech side for only 4 levels of indoor cultivation, you could get up to $250 per square foot when you account for the HVAC equipment, the lighting, and all these structural elements of the farm. So huge differences not only in impact, but also in cost. And so I want you all to be very informed as you pursue this in your design process today to justify why we're going with a vertical farm versus some other elements, or if we can mix in other types to achieve our greater goal together. So there's very different impacts as well. Urban agriculture can have an impact on the aesthetic. It can serve as a way to inform the public of how to be green, of what buildings could look like. The same way that these net zero pilot projects inform developers and inform residents or people who are in the building, urban farms can do the same thing. They can transform the way that we eat, the way we think about food, and the choices we make when we go shopping. Social impact. Okay, so we can create social cohesion. We did some work with Sidewalk Toronto here, looking at different urban ag models for their smart city. And what we found in our study in Toronto was that urban farms, specifically community gardens, serve a really great purpose in Canada to integrate immigrants. They're a place where immigrants learn English. They're a place where they share their culture with other immigrants as far as what they want to produce, what they eat. This is a really important play in emerging cities that are driven largely by immigrants. It's very important to have social cohesion places, and urban farms can provide that in a very effective way. Economic, again, does it produce jobs? A lot of cities are trying to attract vertical farming because of the number of jobs it produces relative to community gardens. Community gardens typically depend on donations and volunteers. If you go more to the high-tech side with hydroponic greenhouses and vertical farms, you can actually get significant job numbers that can be appealing. These are green jobs. These can actually create new entrepreneurs as well. So cities are investing in that specifically. But it's a question when we're judging our project. Does it create economic value? And then there are environmental benefits and trade-offs, right? So on the low-tech side, green infrastructure is important in a lot of cities. In New York City, after an inch of rain, basically the sewage and the water combine and go into the river. And so there's millions of dollars available every year for green infrastructure in New York City. And it's similar in other cities as well. We look at what happened to Houston with the hurricane recently, and that was hugely damaging because urban development was allowed to sprawl without green infrastructure requirements. Urban farms can play a role in that. But high-tech vertical farms don't really provide green infrastructure. You could attach rainwater to it and you can start to get there, but in their typical integration, they don't provide that. They also don't directly contribute to biodiversity. They offset arable land that could be used to produce, but they're not providing space for bees or pollinators where other soil-based urban farms do. So there's really specific trade-offs across the spectrum. Let's go through a little bit of a timeline of how we got there. I think when we look back to the Hanged Gardens of Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar, they were in the desert, and his wife really wanted to green the city, and so the myth goes that he commissioned the Hanged Gardens of Babylon to green the city. It was a hydroponic, essentially a pyramid with various levels of cultivation. And I think that's the same thing we're trying to do in a lot of ways today. We're trying to green our city. We're trying to show leadership through architecture, through design, to inspire a new stage of green infrastructure and green development for our city. Vertical farming, there were some drawings about it in 1909. NFT system, which is a typical standard for greenhouses, was developed in 1975. Dr. Dixon DePalmier, who was my mentor, as I mentioned, and we studied together at Columbia University, wrote his book in 2010. I've met so many vertical farmers who have actually started farms based on that book. The book isn't really technical. It's more of a utopian vision of the future and what these cities would look like. And since then, the whole dialogue has evolved beyond these skyscrapers to more thinking about warehouses, basement spaces, unused spaces in the city that wouldn't require the same capital cost. But it's really interesting to see how these visionary activities and putting ideas out there that may appear unrealistic can actually translate to real businesses and real success later on. So we shouldn't underestimate our capabilities today to inspire a new generation of farmers in Toronto and Ontario. Aero Farms really was leading the way with investment and built the largest vertical farm in the U.S. and I think remains as one of the largest globally. Again, it's a big warehouse, about 60,000 square feet. Is one of their facilities, 11 or 13 levels of cultivation, depending on which tower they use. And then recently, Plentiag, which was a very new player, raised over $200 million, which is an enormous amount for our industry, and is really taking vertical farming global and trying to diversify the crops that can be grown in those farms. And I think when we're looking to the future, we're going to do something different. We're going to build the first net zero vertical farm here in Toronto, which is quite ambitious, but I'm really excited to get into that today. So what are the basic components of a vertical farm? First, we have the shell. So this is the structure that contains the farm itself. So that could be a warehouse. It could be a greenhouse if you're deciding to use natural light. But this one is really about no natural light. We're trying to imply that this is completely indoors. Hydroponics. So Aero Farm uses aeroponics, which is just a subset of hydroponics. Hydroponics also can include aquaponics, which we've got Ripple Farms here. You can talk a bit more about that. But hydroponics basically just means that the driver for nutrients and oxygen for the plants is water itself and not soil. And so what you're doing is you're controlling a lot more of the variables and you're using the hydroponics to do the work. And there's many different kinds, and we can talk about that if you have questions, but for now I'm just going to speed through this. Now we need a medium. So because we don't have soil typically in these indoor farms, we need something to hold the roots. Now, there's many different kinds. Some is a spun rock. There's different gravel types. In the case of aeroponics and aero farms, you're using a thin film of material that's reusable. But basically, you need something to hold those roots and can keep them strong so that they can access the nutrients and water and stabilize them as they go through their growth cycle. We need LEDs. Why LEDs and why not other lights? Well, LEDs run a little bit cooler, or a lot cooler, and a lot less energy than most of the typical lights. They also can be thinner profile, so that makes sense when you're stacking, and that's the common use. LEDs have advanced hugely in the past 10 years that I've been involved in the industry. So it's very exciting to see that, and I just want to highlight that IntraVision is a leader in this kind of technology, and they're here today. HVAC, so we need to maintain basically on the canopy zone. As you have all these plants, they're evapotranspirating, so it's creating humidity that's changing the temperature. So even in a vertical farm, you have many different microclimates. So you need to have a lot of HVAC, not only kind of macro for managing the whole system, but even on small levels to handle microclimates. Sometimes these can be small computer fans or different styles of ventilation through perforated surfaces. But in any case, that remains one of the greatest challenges as you expand your farms and get much bigger. And then you need the structure. What's going to hold it all up? When you look at a farming level, you need storage, processing, distribution, sensors to know what's happening in your farm, and automation as well. So let's get into some economics. These are some economics I pulled from a vertical farm in Japan. The reason I chose that one is because it's one of the oldest, and they have actual evidence, or at least they've been operating long enough to prove that they can make profit. But as you can see, it's quite expensive for a facility of this size, 14,000 square feet. These are US dollar numbers. And you can get an enormous yield per day. I mean, 10,000 heads of lettuce per day, that creates a really interesting case to provide consistent product to distributors. But the key takeaway here is that 7 to 8 years, the large-scale vertical farms are still very difficult economically. I think these economics have improved. A lot of the feasibility studies we do end up around 6 to 7 years for large-scale vertical farms. And soon I'm going to go through some quick case studies that will show you how adjusting your size or piloting can help you really improve your ROI as well. What about the operational economics? This is again an observation of a large-scale vertical farm. We've got a huge portion on utilities, typically split relatively equally, depending on the climate, between HVAC and energy for LEDs. So for example, in Saudi Arabia, your HVAC costs are going to be higher than your LED costs. But here, I suspect it'll be pretty evenly split between the two. Labor is an enormous cost still, which is why you see a lot of farms moving towards automation. And then we have consumables. This, I also just wanted to include transportation in there, just for simplicity. So these are things like our seeds, our substrate for the plants, and transportation. And then depreciation is actually really significant. A lot of people don't consider that. But the lights typically last about 70,000 hours. So after 7 years, you need to replace your lights. Now that's probably going to be about a 30% investment or 35% investment of your capital costs up front. So that's a huge consideration when you're doing your economics. If you're not considering depreciation for your HVAC and your lighting, you're going to have economics that are unrealistic. So here are some case studies. This is Farm 1. This is their second facility. Farm 1 worked with Agritecture Consulting to develop Manhattan's first commercial vertical farm. It's in a basement. The second location is in Tribeca. The first location is in the financial district. And essentially what they're doing is they're using shallow wrap systems. They're growing a wide variety of crops, and they mostly only serve a Michelin star restaurant. So this isn't feeding the world, but it is solving a problem. High-end restaurants do import product by refrigerated planes or trucks, so there's a huge environmental cost there, and they're providing a new opportunity for chefs to engage with this. So you can see a huge variety of edible plants, various herbs. These are the kind of typical things. And you can see the setup is just like I described with structure and lighting. And you can see here, these are some fans to maintain the microclimate, for example. And of course, they work with chefs, and they have a really beautiful Instagram account. But the point I wanted to say is that they have, it's really beautiful. Don't miss it. If you're not following it, I'm serious. So, but Farm 1, they started small, right? So about 500 square feet was the first facility. The second one is 1,200. They sold out of the first facility in the first year. And so they were able to get their money back beyond executives. It's a profitable business, which is great. And so they're able to expand, and now they're able to expand to other cities. So I'm going to give you some lessons to take away from this. But going too big too fast is a common problem we see. There have been about 4 to 6, actually, by now, major vertical farming bankruptcies in the past 5 years. So there's millions of dollars to lose, and I'm not trying to scare you because there's also opportunities for success, but we need to be smart about this. There's no point in wasting our time and hurting a city's reputation because we don't plan this out properly. Square Roots is Kimball Musk's project with Tobias Peggs, and they hired us to develop the world's first vertical farming accelerator. Now their idea was really cool. It was saying, let's get 10 containers, let's give an entrepreneur each a container, and 1 year to develop their farming business. And basically it's under a single brand, and then as the farmers sell the product, they get money back to pay for the expenses of the rent and the equipment. So it's a great idea, but some of the challenges with it are that, when you're inside these farms, it's a difficult work environment in one sense. You're not also getting the maximum output per laborer. So by our estimates, one laborer can manage 4 farms. Instead, you're giving them 1. So you're not really maximizing the labor output from that. Containers are exciting because they're easily deployable, but that's also a misconception. We had to dredge or at least break into the ground to build the piping. Excess water from it with the nutrients, you can't just dump it into the system. So you have to have a truck that comes and picks it up. You have to hook up energy. You have to pay rent for outdoor space, even if it's a parking lot. So I think a lot of people have major misconceptions about the benefits of shipping container farms. And often it's better to, I think, take a warehouse and do modular style farms within a warehouse than it is to do a container. Another major issue in a climate like New York or Toronto is that as the temperature changes from hot to cold, it does affect the crops that are in the system, even if it's insulated. Because every time you open that door, you don't have a vestibule, you're then going to have cold air come in or hot air come in. It's going to be difficult. So you're not really getting that maximum control when you just do a container. So a couple different issues. On a CO2 footprint area, as you shove all this equipment into a single container, you're not getting the economies of scale of equipment. So the CO2 output or the CO2 footprint per plant is actually much higher than if you were to try and design your farm to maximize based on your HVAC equipment or your lighting equipment and economies of scale there. The bigger you buy, often the more efficient in this industry. But look, they're growing year-round despite that, and they've had huge success. They were able to raise another $5.5 million after the first year of the project. So very excited to see that grow and develop. Now, Aero Farms is the big one, right? So what they've done is they've converted a warehouse and gone for the kind of really big, bold idea of vertical farming. An Aero Farms facility could cost $30 million, depending on the size of it, but a 60,000 square foot space probably would cost close to there. So major investments. In the end, you have to recoup that cost by selling salad mix and leafy greens. That can be a challenge if you don't have enough customers in place. And we still don't see the evidence that consumers are going to say, hey, it's a vertical farm product. I want to pay 20% more. I want to buy that every time. I think consumers like to buy local. They like to support farmers. But I'm not certain yet that we've proven that large-scale vertical farming supplies that need specifically. I find that most of them like to support small farmers, like Square Roots, or I think Ripple would be a good example, where they feel more connected to the farm itself. And this is huge capital costs, but potentially this is the future of actually impacting the yields and impacting some of the problems that Andrew was talking about. And they've had huge success. They worked with 100 resilient cities. We're very happy to see the results they've had. And they use an aeroponic method, which I can answer a bit more detail about later. And one of the things I think Aero Farms does the best of all the companies I've seen is food safety. A lot of people think that when you go indoors, it's automatically food safe, but actually the risks can get higher. And so you need to really practice food safety in an active way, and this again is a cost. There's certification costs for this, there's training costs for this, there's consulting costs for this that you need to consider. But this just gives you an idea of all the jobs they've created and the people they've trained in a place like Newark. And I think what Aero Farms also does really well is they're revitalizing communities that need it. So Newark has been left behind, and what they've really done is created real jobs, living wage jobs, and demonstrated that you can take a warehouse and use that conversion to a vertical farm to create a thriving community around it. Other businesses have been attracted as a result of this. So that's a win. So let's talk about Ontario a bit. In our work with Sidewalk, we were able to do some analysis on Ontario. There's huge opportunities. So first of all, we have, this is about the economic output of agriculture in the Golden Horseshoe area. And then we have a $20 billion a year annual import bill. So that's what we're importing. About 30 years ago, I think, the Golden Horseshoe was actually a net exporter. And we were providing food to a lot of this part of the continent, but also even beyond. But as we've urbanized and pushed agricultural land away from the city, or basically taken it, we now are paying the consequences of that, and we're importing more food than we export. And there's huge opportunities here to turn that around. But one of the studies we looked at approximated that 50% of that product could be grown locally. So not only in vertical farms, but in many other types of farms, but most of the crops that they mentioned we could grow locally are fruits and vegetables, which could have a chance in greenhouses and vertical farms. So there's an economic opportunity that's defined that we can actually access and benefit from with this project. Other things I've noticed in Toronto is that there's a really thriving urban agriculture scene, and it's quite varied. So Ryerson has an urban farm. We have a number of soil-based farms and many community farms. The Toronto Food Policy Council is showing a lot of leadership and supporting them. And there's actually a lot of available data on what their needs are and what they're experiencing. We have indoor vertical farms like Leave to Grow, which is a new one that Intravision helped set up. Modular Farms does containers, but they also have some of their own production. And then Living Earth Farm does soil-based agriculture in a vertical system. And then aquaponics, we've got Ripple Farms, Aqua Greens, Water Wheel Farms, and there are some others. As we surveyed these farms, we found that they have some common needs. One is access to talent. They need really talented people who can work in the farm, who are trained in food safety, who understand the technology. They also needed policy support, so they really didn't have a lot of, there's not a lot of clear rules around where you can build a vertical farm or not. It's easier around backyard farming or chickens or rooftop farming, but vertical farming is still quite new. So we need to help the City of Toronto recognize that this is already happening. Entrepreneurs want to do this, they want to scale up, and if they want to keep that business in the city, we need to create realistic policies to support them. So going into building your own farm, some common costly mistakes I want you to avoid as you go through your design process. The biggest one we see at Agritecture Consulting is miscalculated wastage. So typically people do their economics and they'll say, oh, it's a vertical farm, we're not going to waste anything. It's not true. Any new farm has waste. You're trying to get your product sold, you're trying to get your recipes optimized. So we work with 30% wastage for new farmers to start off with, and the project is we can get down to 5% wastage. Eventually you might be able to get lower than that, but it'll probably never be exactly zero. So you also need to think about what you do with that waste, whether it's going to a food bank or otherwise. Equipment depreciation I mentioned. Labor costs are very hard to estimate because there's not a lot of examples of these farms. So how do you really calculate the daily activities? Well, the way we do it is we actually model the farm three-dimensionally, and we imagine each of the staff members and their activities throughout the day. We build a management plan, which gets us to a more accurate labor estimate. Going big right away, this is a common one. Let's raise a bunch of money, let's build a huge farm. Okay, that's not the right way to do this every time, especially not in a new market. You need to pilot. Piloting will help you confirm your labor costs. It's going to help you confirm your operational estimates. It's going to help you have product to take to customers to say, do you want to buy 10 times this, 100 times this? You can't really make those big sales without product. So piloting is very important. Engineering solves everything. Local Garden was one of the first commercial vertical farms in the world. It was based in Vancouver. It had very engineered systems. It had rotating systems and lights, and a very cool structure. But it went bankrupt within a year. And it was all the equipment was for sale on Craigslist. And I think it was really over-engineered. I think it was focused too much on the technology and not the fact that this is a farm and you have a final product, which is a food product. And that's how you should think about this. So while engineering can improve certain things, my recommendation is to keep it simple, stupid, and just really reduce the amount of failure points in your system and focus on the key routes to success. You need to have a plan B. So a lot of people will design their farm around salad mix, okay? So this is a variety of crops that you cut, package, brand it. It can be great for business because you really get a lot of variety options, it can be flexible, and you can brand it in a new product. But if your consumer doesn't want that, or if you find in your testing your consumer doesn't want that, and you built a system that only grows salad mix, you don't have any area to pivot. So you can't pivot to grow a live basil head, for example, or a full head of lettuce if your system isn't designed for that. But there are certain methods which allow you to have flexibility where you can do both. So if your first crop doesn't work, you can actually have a backup plan that's viable, that can be estimated in your business, and you can adapt and respond in that way. There's an obsession with data in this industry. People talk about plant recipes. People talk about, I get a recipe, you plug it in, and your farm is going to produce this. We're not there yet, It's very important we track our data in our farms. That's absolutely important. But I just don't want any of you to assume that there's recipes out there that you can plug into a vertical farm and it's going to work the same way every time. This is marketing language that's put out there specifically by a lot of LED companies and turnkey technology companies to make you buy their products, but it's really not how the farming works. So data doesn't solve everything, and it's still the Wild West. The first commercial vertical farm in North America was 5 years ago, so let's be honest, there's a lot to learn still. Metrics that matter. So what about when you're judging your farm and its success? There are 3 metrics that we look at that are the most important for us. What was your CapEx per plant site? Okay, what did you invest to get every single plant out of the system? How many grams per kilowatt hour? What's your efficiency as it relates to energy and your output? And what's your unit cost? What's your margin? Do you really understand that? Is that a healthy margin? Pretty straightforward, but they can go a long way. So as we think about the future, Agritecture Consulting thinks about cities. We've been gathering models as we've consulted clients and doing scenarios for them, and we want to work with cities to basically estimate these at a macro scale. So we did some of this work with Sidewalk, we're doing some of this work in Saudi Arabia, but we want to do more of this work globally. And so we have basically our own scenario development service, which basically takes all of our models and we can estimate different scenarios for a city. So if the city wants to focus on community, if you want to focus on jobs, if you want to focus on yield, we can actually take our thousands of urban agriculture models and lay them out over the available spaces in the city and estimate what is the ultimate goal or the ultimate possibility that we can have, and which is the most viable scenario. Then we can move backwards and create structured incentives and plans to achieve those goals. So that's a new service that we're really shopping around globally now, and I just want to make you aware of. Now again, going back to cities, there's this obsession with smart cities, but if you look at most of the smart city movements, they don't include food, which is so disappointing. And it's completely inappropriate. Because the fact is, if you look at Cape Town, they had a citywide Wi-Fi plan, but they didn't have a plan for their water. And you look how that went. And so these kind of smart city initiatives, we can get obsessed with them, but if we forget the basics for human survival, we're really going to miss out. So again, what good is a smart city without food and water? Not much. So we want to really think about how we can bring this technology in to improve cities overall and make the whole system smarter. And we cannot continue with the same attitude of, oh, agriculture is not for us, that's for poor people, or that's for outside of the city. That's not part of cities anymore. We are paying the consequences of that attitude today. And so I think we have a unique opportunity for this workshop to show how we can connect this with the top-notch best practices in green building and how urban agriculture can be integrated into those and show an example that these two don't have to be mutually exclusive. So again, my kind of greater purpose is, I don't think vertical farming is the best thing for vertical farming's sake. I see vertical farming as a major driver for sustainable urban development. And let me ask you this way. Try to think of a green technology that embraces the food, water, energy nexus better than vertical farming. There's not really one that I can think of that embraces it better. You have to understand, how do you produce biomass? How do you manage water? How do you manage energy? And simultaneously, you have to explore entrepreneurship. These aren't solar panels, right? These are businesses. These are job-creating activities in the city. And so I think as we invest in vertical farming, we need to understand that along the way, we're also going to unlock new understandings about cities and sustainable urban development. Thank you so much for your time today.
I knew that would be good. That was well done. Thank you very much.